Right, Pnawn da, good afternoon, First Gama. Today is the first of the 7 sessions we have planned to help international languages teachers prepare and transition into the new curriculum for Wales. Tonight, we're very fortunate to have with us Gillian Campbell-Thow, who did not hesitate to come and support us after contacting her in September. When I saw Gillian at the Language Nut MFL question time last June, it was obvious that her experience in making the shift to the new, or not so new, Scottish curriculum for excellence and her expertise in teaching and learning modern languages would be a great source of inspiration and support for our schools in Wales. Gillian is a Quality Improvement Officer for Glasgow City Council. She is a languages teacher and has been leading language learning and teaching in Glasgow schools for 10 years. She has also been leading Gaelic medium education in Glasgow schools for 5 years. A former faculty head, Scottish Teacher of the Year, and former chair of the Scottish Association for Language Teaching. Gillian has been part of the team working with Scottish Government to write and design the 1+2 language learning policy, as well as 2 Gaelic policies. Her current day job involves being the link officer to a number of primary and secondary schools across Glasgow, as well as strategic lead for languages. She is also an associate teaching fellow of the University of Glasgow, where she teaches on the postgraduate certificate of education for language learning. So you'll agree that Gillian is probably the best possible person to understand all our fears and questioning around planning, where to start, and how to translate this very high level framework, which is our new curriculum for Wales, into concrete day-to-day lessons in the classroom. But she will also be able to remind us of that perspective of what we can achieve and the endless possibilities and freedom that we can have as practitioners to really elevate our teaching and learning in order to provide the range of rich and exciting experiences which will help our students become ambitious, capable, open-minded, creative and confident learners and members of society. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Gillian for our session on sharing experiences of schools in Scotland. Gillian, over to you.
Lovely, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Steph. Pnawn da, I hope I've got that right. I'm not very good at Welsh, but I promise I'll try learn a bit more. And as we would say in Scots Gaelic, Fesca ma harchin, Came around you, how are you? Hope you're well. That was a lovely introduction, Steph. I should clarify, I'm a teaching fellow at Strathclyde University. When we talk about other universities, it's like when you hear the Stormtrooper music or whatever else. So it's lovely to be here with you. And I hope you've had a good day so far. I was saying to Steph that this morning I was down the coast in Largs, which is where you go and catch the ferry going to Millport. I'm visiting a student teacher and it's been planes, trains and automobiles. There's all sorts of things going on. So it's an absolute pleasure to be with you. I've got a PowerPoint that I'm going to talk round to, and that will be made available to you. And as Steph said, we'll have questions at the end. Please do anything at all, just pop it in the chat. And also please do give me a wee wave if I speak too quickly. I get dead excited and I end up speaking really quickly. And one of the things that when I first went to university at Heriot a long time ago, they sent me to speech and language classes because I speak far too quickly. So I have promised Steph, I'll try and slow down for you, but I do get a bit excited. Anyway, okay, Steph, if you wouldn't mind sharing the PowerPoint, that would be great. I'm going to do my best thing to do at the, at the government briefing. Say next slide, please. We did a bit of that. So here we go, smashing. That's great, thanks, Steph. So just, so as you can see, we all use these wee emojis, don't we? Because that's what I think I would like to look like. Unfortunately, my hair's nothing like that at all at the moment. And the logo that we have there, you can see we've got modern languages, and we have it in Gaelic and we have it in English, because that's it's the whole idea to be equal respect for the language. And interestingly enough, we're actually in Scotland now moving away from even using the word modern languages, because it's maybe not just as inclusive as it could be. Particularly if we're looking at how we teach Latin or we teach BSL or other languages, would we necessarily say that they're modern? But anyway, and we've got a wee kind of flashing GIF at the bottom, our dear green place. So the word for Glasgow in Scottish Gaelic is Glasaho, and it means the dear green place. And you'll know recently we had COP26, so there's been lots of things going on, and this has been part of the kind of media package that we've used, so it's always quite nice, really. So on the next slide, it's basically just more of an aid memoir for me, just to remind me what we're going to be doing. And what and the next slide, it's my details. That's my email address there. So it's gillian.campbell-thou@glasgow.gov.uk, and you're very welcome to contact me directly, and I'll talk to you about the kind of support and things that, you know, Steph and I have discussed that we can do. That's my own Twitter, Senora CT, without the tilde. It tends to be a lot of nonsense on that one, generally shoes, kind of views, nonsense. But the one for Glasgow, so at Glasgow Langs, is our official Twitter page that we use for everything that's going on in Glasgow schools. So we usually put lots of details of courses, what schools are up to, wee bits and bobs. So if you're on Twitter, please feel free to, you know, to follow us or interact with what have you. We tend, as I say, we put a lot, all the official stuff goes through Glasgow Langs. My own one is a bit more meanderings about wearing tutus, perhaps welly boots, and whatever else. So on the next slide, please. Thanks, Steph. So to talk to you about the situation that you're probably in just now. So for us, it's before Curriculum for Excellence, and then having a wee look at what Curriculum for Excellence is like for us now, you know, kind of more than 10 years down the road, and then kind of what are our next steps, what are we working on, and what's happening. Okay, so as Steph mentioned, I've been really kind of, it's just languages are such a huge part of my life, and very much I suppose define myself by it, you know, language learning, you know, teaching and helping to get better, but having worked through it, because the last thing you want really is for somebody to say, oh, here's what you could do, and here's maybe what you could do. Well, I'm going to tell you what we did and how it worked, and where that kind of thought process has kind of come from. So on the next slide, you'll see we've got a couple of interesting wee graphics. So the first one there, it says 5 to 14. That was our old curriculum framework that we worked in, and that was basically, there was a core curriculum that went for children from the ages of 5 in primary right up to what would be about second or third year in secondary school. And now when you talk about 5 to 14, you feel like you should be in some kind of support group when you talk about it, you know. I liked 5 to 14, there you are, okay. To be fair, I still actually have the books for it. And then, so we had 5 to 14, and we had a thing called, if you like, it was higher still. So in Scotland, as you'll know, our exams are a wee bit different. And we don't have GCSEs, we have a thing now, the equivalent of GCSEs would be things that we call nationals, okay. So national 5 is round about that level, and then we've got highers rather than A levels. So we had pre-curriculum for excellence, if you like, for primary and up until the kind of middle of secondary school, we had 5 to 14, and it was very structured. So it went from kind of levels A to F. Children didn't start doing language learning until about primary 6, and it was started at level C. Okay, so they didn't do anything before it, started at level C, and then would carry on, if you like, to F, which was the highest level, before then going on to national qualifications. And one of the things that they certainly for me, when I went through my teacher training as it was then, not initial teacher education as it is now, but certainly when I went through my training, it was a case of, well, you know, here's what the exam looks like, and here's what children need to know. And that was just the way it was, you know, about 25 years ago, that was the way it was. So we had a thing called Higher Still, and you can see on the logo there, again, Glasgow City Council were really kind of heavily involved in that. And although Glasgow as a city is very small, it's the biggest education authority in Scotland. So we're responsible for 1/10 of all language learning that goes on. So, you know, there's quite a lot there. But this is a wee kind of quote there from, it was a journal that kind of came out in about 2010, and it was from Mark Priestley, who some of you may have heard of. I know he's been advising on that move to curriculum from Wales. And I thought it was quite interesting, because so that's from about 10 years ago. And it says, Scotland's new curriculum for excellence, CFE, has been widely acknowledged as the most significant educational development in a generation, with the potential to transform learning and teaching in Scottish schools. And common with recent developments elsewhere, CFE, Curriculum for Excellence, seeks to re-engage teachers with the processes of curriculum development, to place learning at the heart of the curriculum, and to change ingrained practices of schooling. And there's a wee link there that will take you to that article. So that was the whole idea behind it, you know, that we would really look again at what we were doing, because, you know, the question that was put to us, you know, is what you're doing working? And if it's not working, then what do we need to do? Okay. And on the next slide, I suppose, kind of gives it a fairly kind of good idea of, you know, and this might look familiar to you. So it was basically everybody kind of started with, what was the end point before we even thought about the beginning point? What was the end point? What did we need to do to get children through an exam? Okay. And somewhere along the line, I think we'd all just forgotten how lovely it was to be able to teach children how to communicate. Okay. So you had the exam, And then that was kind of dictated to, you know, the language content, okay, and what was the grammar content for it. And if you could just learn it off by heart, take it home, learn it off by heart, and come in and do it tomorrow and under exam conditions, and a real lack of proper continuous professional learning, okay, that kind of real lack of CLPL, as we will call it, you know, that real kind of continuous lifelong professional learning. I did, you know, for the kind of first chapter of my teaching career, you didn't go to any training courses, you know, you came out of your teacher training, you went into school, and that was it. Okay, and I certainly even have memories myself when I was doing standard grade. It was a long time ago, let me tell you. I'm doing standard grade, and I remember learning how to book in at a hotel, using the same language to learn how to book into a campsite, learning how to book into a youth hostel. Okay, and it was all this same stuff. I remember sitting my higher French oral exam, and I can still regurgitate that spoken presentation I had to learn. At the time, I don't really know if I knew what it meant. Okay, but I just did it. Cette année, j'ai lu un livre qui s'appelle blah. Okay, and we were teaching people how to regurgitate and whatever, you know, and were we really getting the focus right on the skills? Because we were very driven with big lists of vocabulary, you know, big single list, you know, big lists of words, and you know, within certain areas that we had to do, and you know, you couldn't teach the perfect tense until they were at least in third year. No, they can't be speaking, you know, in the past until they're 14 or 15, because they're still getting to grips with the present tense, and God forbid you even thought about mentioning a subjunctive before they got to, you know, 6th year, because they just couldn't cope, right? So that was kind of weird, and to be fair, we were probably the ones that were putting ceilings on the language learning, because that was your age and stage, and that's what you had to do, and please, whatever you do, don't get above your stage. And that whole idea of learning it off by heart, because as you know, as practitioners, we're judged in results. With the best will in the world, people will say, oh, but it's the kids are, you know, if they're attaining, it's great, and they're achieving, yeah, but I'm still being told I need to get, you know, X, Y, Z results or whatever. So we kind of came from this process where, I suppose we were involved in this process to try and look at, right, what is it we really want as practitioners? And I remember going out on a visit to a school, and I was working with the departments of improvement work, and I sat, you know, the girls down with a coffee, and I said, listen, do you still get excited coming to your work? And they just started laughing, and they're like, no. I mean, you wake up and you go, yes, I'm going to my work, and it's dead exciting, and we'll have a pure riot, and we'll have great fun with the children, and we're going to be talking, you know, a different language. And they're like, no, we don't like it. I said, why do you not like it? And they talked about the curriculum. And they talked about a curriculum they felt that was tired and was boring, and, you know, it wasn't what they wanted to do, you know. So when you start asking those questions, right, well, you know, what is it you want to do? Well, I want to teach children all about, you know, the culture of a language and how to communicate. We didn't say that they had to learn how to book into 3 different places, you know. They didn't say that they had to recite verb tables. It was just a bit of, we're all just a bit done with it. And I don't know whether we were getting to the stage where we were, well, there's a good word we use in Scotland, it's a Scots word, and it's the word scunnered, okay? And to be scunnered is just when you're absolutely cheesed off. There's the best translation I can give, right? You just say you're scunnered. But not only were we scunnered, we were pure scunnered, right? We were very cheesed off, right? Because it was all just getting a bit there, you know. So on the next slide, we have the yellow brick road. And so what did that mean then? So what did this look like for us to come from this whole idea about, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, the system wasn't broken, but it was just a wee bit tired, you know. And the transition then meant that there was lots of engagement with teachers, you know, and I know that's something that's going on as well. There was lots of engagement from, it was an organisation called LT Scotland. It was Learning and Teaching Scotland. It's now called Education Scotland, which is one of our big education bodies here. And also the SQA, which is our examining award body, the Scottish Qualifications Authority. And there was lots of work going on round about that, because you really can't change a curriculum without having a look then, you know, at what the exams are going to look like. So this is back in the day, okay? And we're still talking about it, and it's still a great debate just now, because I think, you know, with COVID, it's a bad word, I know, but certainly with COVID, it's really made us all look and say, right, is what we're doing fit for purpose, and are the exams fit for purpose? And right now we're going through another kind of consultation, you know, kind of post OECD report, where we're looking at, right, are we getting it right? You know, is the curriculum content, is it relevant? Is it age appropriate? Do you know, why are we still talking to 15-year-old children about, have you got a dog? You know, have you got a pet hamster? They're like that. Have I got a pet hamster? What are you even talking about? Do you know, so that idea, you know, is it appropriate? Is the way that we're assessing children appropriate? And we as teachers, is the way that we're engaging with what's in front of us, is it the right way? And, you know, are we getting the best out of it? Okay, so on the next slide, what I would like you to do, we've got a wee QR code, okay? If you've used Mentimeter before, what I'd like you to do is either to scan the QR code, or if you can go on to Mentimeter, okay, and put in the code 9919777. Now, if you're doing this, if you're watching this later on, it's a bit like X Factor, your vote will not be counted, okay? It's only open for about the next day or two. And if you go into that, what you'll see is, I'm looking to find out what are the things that you're worried about, okay? It's because it's an absolute privilege for me to be involved, and I'm really looking forward to working with you, you know, over the next kind of couple of months. But I think it's also good to get an idea of what are the things that are worrying you, you know, what are the things that are kind of coming up that we're thinking, right, we need to have a wee look at. So I'm going to have a wee look at this as it's coming out. So if you just indulge me for a wee second, okay? So, and all the things that are coming up already, which I'll download and I'll send on to Steph to send back to you, but you're absolutely right. So there's one that's coming up, you know, workload and not doing it correctly. Workload's a huge thing, absolutely. Lack of information about the required content, correct. Not knowing where to start, to change what I'm doing now. We don't know what the assessments look like. It won't be that different from the current schemes of work as the guidance is so vague. We're not ready. We don't really know what's expected of us. More workload, lack of structure, having to reinvent everything. Yep. Oh, for goodness sake. Yep. This is all the absolutely. And these are all the things then that you know, it's difficult, isn't it? And you look at these and you think, right, these are great. Just keep these responses coming in. And the idea is, it's like, where do we start, isn't it? Where do we start? How do we do it? How do we keep it manageable? Because I think what we found is that we were tempted to throw the baby at the bathwater and the bath itself out, do you know, because all of a sudden it was like, we have to change everything. And the reality is you don't have to change everything, because the languages that you're teaching, you know, they haven't changed dramatically. I know languages evolve and what have you, okay, but they haven't changed dramatically. However, when we're still in that stage of we don't know, okay, so from that slide, what I'm going to do is have a wee look and attempt to try and answer some of those questions as we go through, you know, the next kind of couple of months working with you. So thank you for your honesty. I really appreciate that. And I think it's important to acknowledge that, because we've been there. Okay, and if you want, I suppose it's a case of, you know, being there, made the mistakes, got the t-shirt, ironed it, put it back on again, made a couple other changes, and that constant process of looking to, but it was also a real chance for us to say, right, it was almost like cleaning out your cupboards. I nearly said cleaning out your knicker drawer, but I think that would be highly inappropriate, but there you go, I've just said that, okay? It is a bit like cleaning out, and it's about being brave. And it's about saying, right, what really works and what do we need to do to take that forward? So on the next slide, we've got a couple of wee graphics, and they'll come in kind of one after each other. So this first thing we had was, there was these 4 capacities that we were working around in Curriculum for Excellence, and they wanted all young people to be successful learners. Well, it's not like you wake up and think, well, I hope the children are not successful today. In fact, I'm going to make sure they're not successful, okay? So we want them to be successful learners. We want them to be confident individuals. And it does make us laugh, because now we do find ourselves with a generation of children who are indeed very confident, my 12-year-old daughter being one of them, which does make me laugh. Effective contributors, you know, that they actually feel involved in what they're doing, and that idea about being responsible citizens. And we went through a period, let me tell you, of having to, I suppose, evaluate everything we were doing and saying, right, so how are you addressing these 4 capacities in your curriculum? What do you mean, how am I addressing it? This is just good teaching and learning. And then, of course, it was, how are you addressing numeracy, literacy and health and well-being? So, of course, you're thinking, well, we teach them how to tell the time. We talk about timetables. Is that really what you're looking for? Of course it isn't. But at first it was all kind of, it was just all a wee bit much, you know. So on the next kind of graphic that we've got there is about kind of in children's language, what we can all become and what we were supposed to be doing with these capacities. And eventually you just say, do you know what? By really good learning and teaching, then all this is what happens, you know, when we've got, you know, really high standards and high expectations of teaching and learning, when we've got inclusive practice, you know, and when we really have research-based, you know, kind of informed practice, means that we're going to be able to have children who are effective, who understand what they're doing, who are able to be successful at their level and understand where they fit in the world, okay? And let me just stress to you, okay, one of the things that I'm really passionate about is, you know, to be successful as a language learner doesn't mean you have to be a fluent speaker. Doesn't mean you have to keep passing an exam. And I think we do our children, we do ourselves a real disservice by only saying that, you know, that people are successful language learners if they can pass exams. What if you're an absolute panic merchant and you get into an exam and you go blank and then there's nothing, okay? So I'm kind of, you know, we're about a really positive language learning experience, and how do we meet the needs of all children, you know, that we're privileged to be in front of. And then the last wee graphic that comes in there, thanks Steph, is about these kind of principles of curriculum design. So we had this came to us, you know, from Education Scotland. You can see the wee logo there, and I've got links and things for you to have a wee look at. Yeah, I don't know, you can maybe do that while your turkey's cooking on Christmas Day. But the idea about the ideas about curriculum design. I mean, when was the last time you actually sat down and thought, right, what's my curriculum looking like from, you know, when children first arrive to me to their exit points? What are the exit points? What's the language that I think would be really good for them to know? You know, am I building it around a vocabulary list? Am I building it around a structure? Am I building it around grammatical progression? Okay, so the things that we were kind of, I suppose, charged with was, you know, is there challenge and enjoyment? Ah, who said coming to school was about enjoying yourself, love? Okay, but is there enjoyment in it? You know, and that means for us to teach it. I mean, I'm sure if I was to say to you, right, what's the part of the curriculum or something that really just makes you think, oh, I think I might have a wee day in my bed. You know, there are areas of the curriculum that none of us feel, you know, that maybe we kind of jaggy areas you think, now, or for me, certainly there are grammatical things that quite often I have to go back and look at again. I know what they are, and quite often I just want to say to children, well, it just is. But why do they do that? Because they just do. No, I need to go back and get the grammar books out, you know, and so we have to do that, you know. But that idea about challenge and enjoyment, you know. So, you know, and I suppose the interesting one is about the relevance, because the language learning curriculum, you know, it's got to have changed. Okay, I mean, I remember at school when I used the Tour de France, lovely textbook, if anybody ever remembers, it's probably in the archives now, Thierry and the Famille Garnier, and I tell you, I can tell you it's bad for your teeth, and I can ask where the fridge is, but it certainly wasn't going to help me, do you know, buy my tickets when I went on my holiday, or more important, get my wee gin tonic at the bar. Now, I'm not saying that's the, you know, that's not the curriculum that we're teaching, but, you know, in terms of the relevance, you know, and we always joke about the, have you got a dog, do you know? Yeah, they do need to be able to talk about pets and animals and whatever else, but is that the most appropriate thing we're talking about at the age of 16? Do you know? Where we can use those constructions, do you have, I do not have, I would like, I would not like. If I won the lottery, I would really like, okay? All those lovely, nice, big grammatical constructions, but they don't need to be about dogs and cats and hamsters, okay? You know, we had to, we were reviewing our primary programme, and we had to put in horses. Apparently a lot of Glasgow children have horses. There you are. Certainly when I was doing it at primary, there wouldn't have been any need for horses, let me tell you. So the idea about relevant, and then you have this breadth and depth, and that always causes a lot of discussion. What do you mean by breadth of language? Does that mean more nouns? You know, do children really need to have 64 different items in their pencil case? Do you know? Do they need to have 100 different items of furniture? You know, so that idea about, you know, do we go for that breadth of coverage, or do we go for the depth of it, you know? And I have to say, one of the things we did do was we scaled back on the amount of just random vocabulary and started looking at, right, how do we manipulate your big key structures, you know, that will be repeated in those kind of, you know, real high frequency structures, you know, how do we use them? So that an idea about progression, you know, so of course we recycle language, we do that all the time, but how then does it become, how do we add on to it? How does it get, you know, how does it get maybe more stylistic? How are we able to add in more kind of stylistic language and language that people actually use? You've then got the whole idea about personalisation and choice. Now, I have to say that was the one that threw most of us. What do you mean choice? The Waynes, which is our word for wee children, the Waynes will just be doing what they're told. Okay, the idea about personalisation and choice was, do you mean I've got 30 different, you know, curriculum pathways to plan? Absolutely not. okay? But it took us a wee while to get our head around it because it just came at us like an absolute avalanche. So you want this, and you want that, and you want this, and you would like me to teach my classes and turn up to my work and still be a general superstar. Yeah, pretty much. And the idea then of kind of coherence and progression, okay? So these were the things that we were charged with, right? And to be fair, it did make you want to go and lie down in a dark room, you know, a wee intravenous line with a gin, a bit of whale music, and just pretend it never happened. Or like us, it was like, oh, this might be a big sign. All right, okay, this might be quite good actually. And the danger was not to go for the end point and work back. It was to say, right, what's going to really make something that we're going to enjoy teaching? Because if we're enjoying it, then the kids are going to come with us and they're going to get it as well, you know? So if we can look at the the next slide. I don't know if some of you, if you're familiar with RuPaul's Drag Race. It's quite like about RuPaul's Drag Race, but there we are. And they do this thing called toot it or boot it. And if they like it, it gets a toot. And if you don't like it, it gets a boot. And we were actually doing some in-service training with a whole load of our secondary practitioners, as well as other practitioners from other authorities, about our broad general education curriculum. So we've just done a big refresh on it, you know, as a nation, you know, particularly post-COVID, saying, right, you know, are we getting it right? So we started going through things that we had in our curriculum, and we're saying, right, does it get a toot or does it get a boot? And it's a really good, now you might think, why is she mentioning RuPaul's Drag Race, okay? But the idea, is it something you're going to keep, or is it something that can go? A bit like when you're tidying out your cupboards, okay? So you have your keep pile, you have your definitely booting it pile, and we'll have, if I lose 3 stone pile, and I might get back into it, right? So your maybes pile. So I'm definitely going to keep it, definitely going to chuck it, and if I could just keep my hand away from my mouth, then I might keep that pile as well. So that idea, so we had gone through our curriculums like that, and it was a real hoop, but in all seriousness, there was real professional discussion about, no, I think that's really important that we keep that in, because then we had to look at, you know, was our curriculum culturally responsive? You know, we teach in the most multilingual authority in Scotland, where we have something like 143 languages, okay? You know, so does an all-white curriculum actually reflect what that's like for our children? You know, is there any kind of international aspect to it at all? And why do we keep saying, if you learn a language, you can be a teacher and work in the diplomatic service? Do you know? So it was time to get all that changed. And some of the, I suppose, you know, 3 questions I put to you, and it'd be lovely to see your answers in the chat for this one. You know, do you still feel excited about coming to your work? You know, does it still think, yes? Maybe not now, okay, because we're nearly at the Christmas holidays, we're all just a wee bit tired, okay? But see, in general, do you still feel excited to be a languages teacher? I don't know, pop it in the chat if you want, you don't have to. Do you love the curriculum you teach? Because if you don't love the curriculum you teach, then, you know, then let's think about how we change that, how we make it better. And I remember years ago going to Southampton to speak at the Illich conference. I think it was Illich 5. I can't remember. I don't know. I just remember being really excited because I was on the big plane, you know, coming down south of the wall. And I remember speaking, and there was some absolutely smashing members of the kind of MFL Twitterati, I'm sure you all know. And I just said, you just need to be brave. I mean, you know what works best. And we were talking about being brave. And one of the girls, Claire, and she you know, she's very good doing the sketch notes, and she'd just drawn a big pair of pants and said, yeah, brave pants on. But there is that idea, because, you know, and our strength is in the fact that we're a community of practitioners, you know, and the chance to toot and boot, what would you do? So, you know, what is it that you currently teach? You think, nah, that can go, I've done that. And a lot of people will sit there saying, well, I can't really say anything just now because I don't know what the exam looks like. But if we continue to wait until what an exam looks like, then we're missing the chance of change. You know, we're missing that chance to try and drive that change. So on the next slide, you know, please do put your comments in the chat. I suppose one of the things, okay, that really kind of struck us and continues to strike us, you know, are these areas here, the skills base, okay? And it's one of the things when I'm speaking to my student teachers that we often talk about the importance of talking and listening. Okay, because quite often it's like we need to do the reading and we need to do the writing, and you know, some people say, oh right, that's the oral exam done, so we need no more talking and we're just going to focus on the reading and the writing. You know, are we getting that right? If you look at the which I'll put there's a wee link for it, but in Curriculum for Excellence we have these experiences and outcomes, and most of the experiences and outcomes for us are based on talking and listening, as it should be, because it means then that every child is able to access that, okay? We'll have children who will have barriers to reading and writing, but that doesn't mean that they can't learn a language, You know, they're able to take part in it and they're able to access that curriculum. And then, of course, there is a curriculum. So to be clear, there is no standard curriculum in Scotland, you know, in terms of, you know, what is the French curriculum? We don't have one. And people can't believe that. The student teachers, horrified, where's the teacher's book? Well, it depends what book you're using. You know, and I think people thought that with Curriculum for Excellence, you had to get rid of textbooks. Absolutely not. Okay, there's always a place for a textbook. But similarly, most of those textbooks are now online. People are using them on devices and iPads and whatever. It doesn't mean you throw them out. There were people that literally were burning the books. Stop burning your books. You know, and we always like to keep a wee copy of, you know, Tour de France and things. Here's a wee historical item for your children. So, you know, so there isn't a fixed curriculum for us, right? But we do have a framework, and I'll talk to you about that. You know, one of the things that worries is, what about the language and the grammar? Now, I've been kind of following what's been going on with the GCSEs and A-levels. Oh, my goodness, I tell you, it's a wee bit too complicated for this wee Scottish girl. But the idea about the whole kind of language and grammar, we don't have a list of, say, oh, I don't know, what was the figure I was quoted, 4,000 words that children need to learn? Not at all, not at all. So then you're thinking, right, so how do I know what they need to cover? So we work within 4 particular areas, okay, and it's called SLEC, S-L-E-C, okay, and it's society, learning, employability, and culture. So everything we do is within these 4 areas, SLEC, so society, learning, employability, and culture. And each of the topics that basically work, you know, from, say, national, you know, the national qualifications right through to higher, advanced higher, okay, all come under those 4 headings. And then, of course, your worry is, what does the exam look like? And to be fair, even though we have our new exams now, they change all the time. You know, during COVID, there was parts of those exams had to be removed because we just couldn't do them. They couldn't be delivered. You know, that's okay. That's responding to what we need. And to be fair, you know, we have had a chance to have a fairly big say in that. So our national exams, say, you know, there are some, for example, qualifications that take place in school. And then for the presentation exams from National 5 upwards, there's listening, talking, reading and writing assessed, you know, all 4 skills, absolutely. A big worry is always, is there parity across languages? You know, people say, oh, the Spanish paper, it's much easier than the German paper. You know, we all do it, don't we? We all do it. Now, my subjects to teach are French and Spanish. I'm currently back at university doing my Gaelic degree, and I did German at university as well, do you know, so I'd probably have enough to get me through, like, I don't know, you know, a conversation in German, certainly. But the idea that people were a bit worried, and then they're saying, well, you know, what about Urdu speakers, for example? Because you can do a qualification in Urdu and you can do a qualification in Mandarin. So you have to learn, for example, script, and you have to learn characters. Is there parity then? You know, you've got to learn how to write in a different. So all these big discussions taking place. And then the last one was the equity in establishments. You know, were we all playing by the same rule book? Or were some people being a wee bit naughty when it came to perhaps maybe, say, speaking or you know, so that was a huge thing. And what's happened in Scotland is, so we're divided, you know, a bit like yourselves, into local authority areas, and there's a lead for some, you know, there's a lead for the curriculum area. So I'm the lead for Glasgow, but we also work with different authorities as well. And I was laughing when Steph said, yeah, Gillian was a former chair and she was a former this. Do you know, eventually you have to give some of the stuff up, folk, don't you? Because you just can't do it all. You know, and there's that whole family thing going on as well. But it's true, because there is that whole deal. Are we working together? Are we making this easier? Are we sharing? Okay, because it shouldn't be one, you know, it's one size doesn't fit all, absolutely, and I understand that. However, you know, can we be sure that there's equity in the establishment? So these are the kind of big questions that we discuss, and we still continue to discuss and work with. On the next slide, you'll see we've got, it's just 4 wee kind of things that come in after each other. I could just bring the 4 of them in if you want, that's fine, Steph. So we started off that first wee bit there, give us the experiences and outcomes, or as we like to call them when they first came out, the mad wee codes. Okay, now you can see these mad wee codes there. MLAN 301, MLAN 302. I didn't sign up to be a maths teacher, thanks very much, okay? But the way that they did it was they basically divided the kind of 4 skills into these areas. So, for example, you get listening for information, and then you get listening and talking with others, and then you have reading for information, and there's reading for enjoyment and reading for pleasure. And we're saying, well, how do you measure if somebody's enjoying what they're reading? Is it because they're not bleeding out the ears, or they're not poking their own eye out with a fork? I mean, who wrote these? Was it a Friday afternoon, you know, when they had nothing better to do? So when the E's and O's first came out, they were drafted, and the teachers had a good big say, and then went back and forth and back and forth. And now, to be fair, they're actually really user friendly. Okay, so it basically gives you the levels that we use per year group, if you like. Well, within, say, lower secondary. Okay, when you get to like exam stage, it's different. But it's been really good in kind of directing the skills for us. Doesn't give you a list of words, doesn't give you topics, but it does give us that kind of skill base as to where we're going. And then in 2017, we had what we called the benchmarks. So they were basically pulled apart again. And how do we evidence that? Okay, so we had the E's and O's. So we need to talk about these E's and O's. And it's not a case of, right, we need to get, 50 E's and O's to say that you've covered enough French in the curriculum for whatever. Okay, it was really about, here's the skills area. Here's what children should be able to do in a language. They should know about term taking. They should know about how to ask and answer questions. They can respond to familiar language. And then we move on to, they can respond to unfamiliar language. They can use literacy strategies to help them read. They can use a dictionary. They can use this, that, and the next thing. So, and once we got familiar with that, but at first we were very resistant to it, because it was a bit like, oh, it's just something else, and it doesn't tell me if I have to teach about the cats and the dogs. Okay, but then once you get away from that and you realise that it's a great chance then to kind of take forward what it's going to look like. And the benchmarks then for us were again, they came out to us in draft form. We all got a big say on it. They went back to Education Scotland. And a fabulous woman called Louise Glenn, who's a senior education officer at Education Scotland, worked really, really hard on these. And they basically, as I say, they pull apart the expectations. And this is what we want children to be able to do. This is their entitlement to study languages right up until the end of third year. So on the next slide, which I'll leave you to do as a wee bit of professional development. So it takes you directly to the link where our E's and O's are. But on the second link, so that's the SQA, and we have something called a productive grammar grid. Now, these are the two documents that we work in conjunction with. This productive grammar grid basically gives you the expectations per stage of the grammar that needs to be covered in each language. Now, that can be different, but it's a bit like what I was saying earlier, don't cover the imperfect tense till they're at least 16. Don't do a subject, that idea. So working together with them really then gives you that, right, okay, we can see where it's going. And I think the good thing for us is that they were written by practitioners, which is really helpful, So that's that one there. The next slide, and again, I'll let you you can do that one yourself. The next one is about to learn, you have to listen, okay? And I know that might be, you're probably thinking that I never stop talking and I don't listen. But I think what was nice for us is we did feel that we were listened to. Not all of the concerns were acted on, but we also spoke to the children about what they wanted to learn about. They don't get me wrong. I had some children were telling me things they would like to, how do I buy my carry out on a Friday night? Okay, that's fine. I'm sure that'll be very useful to you, just not today. Okay, but the idea then about thinking, right, okay, what would most be useful to our children to learn as well? Keeping within a framework. I'm not saying that we all of a sudden just let them decide and let them, but we need to have that kind of pupil representation among it as well. And it was an interesting exercise for me to do as a faculty head, working with my staff, and we did a real kind of crowdsourcing exercise with parents as well, saying, what were the types of things that you did at school? What would you have liked to have been able to learn? Because I've still to find anybody, when they say to me, what is it you do? And I'll say, well, I'm a languages teacher and I work with teachers to help them get better and to try out different things. Nobody's ever said to me, oh, that's rubbish. That's terrible that you speak languages that much. Most people say, I really wish I'd stuck in at school. Or they come up with this really random phrase that they learned that's kind of stuck in their head. And it's a favourite exercise of ours to do when we're working with primary teachers and say, give us the most random phrase you remember from school. And it's hilarious, and you're looking at it thinking, yeah, I used to say all of them. That's an absolute riddy, as we would say, total embarrassment. Okay, so the idea about having other people involved in it. On the next slide, I suppose there are 4 areas for us that were really important. And the first one, if you can just click the next button along, please, Steph, thanks, there's wee bits that come up. And again, thank you. The idea about interdisciplinary learning, and all of a sudden people thought, right, we need to be doing science and French. No, you don't. And we need to be doing maths and Spanish. No, you don't. And interdisciplinary learning is not you taking a picture of a plant and labelling it. Okay, that's of absolutely no use to man or beast. Okay, interdisciplinary, and I can't even say it. IDL, there we are. IDL should really be about that there's language output as opposed to being somebody's pet project in another subject. And we stick a couple of French words round about it. We're doing a project on the rainforest. We'll put the Spanish word up for leaf and tree. Aye, very good, right? No use to man or beast here. So that idea about proper, meaningful, interdisciplinary learning, there I said it, okay? And it doesn't mean that we go to home economics to make a bouche de Noël either, okay? And it's really looking at, how does our subject really get in about that? And then the next bit, thanks, Steph, the idea about talking and listening and not being afraid to do talking and listening. Because quite often it's like, no, if we do the reading and writing, I'll keep them quiet, okay? Listen, you and I both know, language learning is messy. It should be messy, and it's noisy, and it's a creative process. It's not like we're going to be saying to babies as they're beginning to babble and make sense, could you just shush, and could you read that reading comprehension and write me a wee essay at home? Of course we don't, right? So it's about being brave enough to, to do more talking and listening and to use the target language because, and as one of our great friends, as everybody knows, but it's absolutely true, if we don't get enough comprehensible input, we're not going to get the output. So children aren't going to be able to speak in a language if they're not hearing a language. The idea, I suppose, as well about development of skills, Steph, just in the next bit there, thanks. Bloom's taxonomy. Oh, everybody went mental for the Bloom's taxonomy up here, and we had Bloom's taxonomy triangles everywhere, and asking kids at 5 years old, now we're going to analyse something. Rach just wanted to play in the sandpit, But as you know, to be a good language learner, it was all about, could you remember the words? Did you learn it off by heart? And for me, if it was up to me, I would flip that on its head. And I think the important thing for us as language teachers is about that creation of language, okay? That we actually give children and young people the skills to create language, where they're actually desperate to use it and they can put those components together and they can use it as opposed to just remembering big phrases. Now, we've all done it. Remember the first time you had to make a phone call in a language that isn't your mother tongue? I bet you had it written down, did it, we all did it. I've got a class of primary teachers that are working with me for their higher Spanish, okay? So, their A level. And you say, right, we're going to do some speaking, but we're all doing it on Teams just now, which is the oddest thing. And they're just like, I'll just write it down. Don't write it down, it's speaking, come on. So that idea about really that kind of creation of language. And then the last one there, thanks, Steph, is the intercultural understanding. And as you know, that's a huge thing about, teaching a language, is that you can't separate it. You can't separate language from culture. And then it's, we're allowed to do it. It's just as important as the words, and that idea is, about that cultural iceberg. And I know it can get us into all sorts of discussions and debates. But for me, I think, and if I may share with you, going back to university to study Gaelic, to study Scots Gaelic, a lot of that was a real emotional connection with the music, with, the kind of history and the kind of folklore and being surrounded by it and working within that. For me, it was a real cultural pull. And I think it's hard for you to separate that. I mean, in our family, we brought our daughter up Spanish speaking, but we do lots of the kind of Spanish traditions with her. She gets, wee presents on her Santon, we do the Reyes Magos and the Six, and lots of those cultural things, and yeah, I am that parent at the school are like, off to her daughter again and her Spanish traditions, yeah, because they're precious to us, the same way as there are lots of different Scottish traditions that are really precious to us as well, but that's all part of a language which is really important. So we kind of took those four big things and thought, we're going to run with these, we're going to be brave about this, and we're actually going to make sure we feed it in, because we can't keep saying, well, I'm not doing that because I need to cover content for an exam. Yes, we do have content to cover, but not, I think we run the risk then of just teaching chunks and memorising stuff and actually forgetting about the whole creative process and enjoying, children actually getting that real kick out of language learning, Anywho's, I'm aware of the time, so I'll stop getting all emotional and telling the story. So next slide. Right, I had to put something in Scottish, didn't I? So I like that wee quote there when it said, be sure to enjoy language, to experiment. And, when we're talking, never guess, be exuberant even when you don't feel like it. The idea, I'm sure some of you, well, I'm sure most of you know, this is Merida, who was the Scottish Disney princess. And it's a lovely wee quote. And, our fate lives within us. You only have to be brave enough to see it. And I know you're thinking, look, Gillian Hen, it's a Monday night, I've had a hard day at my work, know your own quote and Disney princesses, right? But see the idea, if you don't make the change, then it happens to you. Okay, so you need to be the ones to actually drive that and say, well, do you know what? See, I mean, if you had a magic wand and you could toot or boot, then what would you do? So My next to last slide, okay, is about where we are. Okay, so now what? So what's going well for us at the moment? So the depth of language that we're now doing, because we have a national language learning policy where all children are learning languages in primary one, then we see much better depth of language. So we're seeing these kind of same structures being reviewed and added on, and it's much better. Not focusing on 100 and different one topic areas, bringing down the topic areas, but much more depth of language and a real review of skills, which is great. And also I would put in there as well inclusion, and making sure that every child is able to access language learning, okay? There should be no child that's been extracted from language learning because it's just not for them, okay? A closer look at pedagogy. We have made a real investment in pedagogy. Right, let's look at what we're actually doing, what actually works. Now, in terms of teacher satisfaction, I wouldn't ask that question on a Monday at 5 o'clock at night, you know, when you've got a week to go before Christmas and we've got that pesky COVID doing the rounds, right? However, are we happier now? Yeah, I would say we probably are, you know, I think, but again, that depends on the levels of support. Digital literacy has obviously been a massive learning curve, particularly over that kind of lockdown period, but it just shows you what you can do when you have to. Although I do confess to at one point, when it all just went a wee bit Pete Tom for me, as I was delivering to 70 practitioners, and I took my iPad into my kitchen where I have chalkboard paint, and I just pointed it at the wall and started chalking on the wall, right? I'm a bit chalk and talk, I'm old school. Teacher involvement in SQA, so lots of teachers. So I'm one of the advanced higher visiting assessors, just did an email to say about how I'm doing my training again, all right. So that idea where lots of practitioners are involved with SQA. Teacher representation through organisations like SALT, which is the Scottish Association for Language Teachers, and a real refreshed view of continuous and lifelong professional learning. So people are really looking at and saying, yeah, if I want to get better, then, you know, let's do something about it. What do we need to work on? Well, funnily enough, curriculum time allocation varies, you know, so we don't have, it's not a case of, you know, every child's going to get 4 hours or everybody's going to get whatever. So that's something that we're working on, you know, certainly for me in Glasgow with my practitioners. Post-lockdown pick-up, absolutely. We're still talking about, you know, where do we go from here? When at another point, you know, we've missed so much, we're recovering. Eventually, it's just a case of, right, and now we need to move on. And there's a real anxiety around about exam changes. Of course there is. Of course there is. We're going into the new year knowing that, you know, within the next couple of years, we're looking at changes again. And you know what? Fine. We'll just meet them on the road as they're coming. Absolutely. So there are things that are going well. There are things that need to be worked on, and that's okay. And the next slide, which can be a wee bit of homework for you, okay, is a lovely wee clip from Skills Development Scotland, and it talks about the idea of, you know, what is it we need to do to thrive in the future, you know, and it's all about communication. And then, of course, I just absolutely love that, and I use this a lot with teachers. You know, before a child speaks, it sings, and before they write, they paint, and as soon as they stand, they can dance. And art is the basis of human expression. And it was one of my line managers that said to us, you know, just as we were coming out one of the lockdowns, you know, what was it? The first step out of oppression, thanks COVID, is expression. You know, and that's exactly what we do. And I think sometimes we forget, you know, about what we bring to the table as language teachers. You know, so yeah, the very last slide again, just my details and what have you. That's basically just, I suppose, a wee kind of hop, skip, and a jump through what it looked like for us, what that kind of transition looked like, where we are. You know, the nuts and bolts of putting together a curriculum. Absolutely, that's for future sessions. Okay, Steph, how are we doing for time?
We're doing very, very well. Fantastic.
Good.
Well done. Shall I stop sharing now?
Yeah, perfect.
So just to thank you so much for all this. I know you've packed a lot in very limited time, but I think the thought to take away tonight, I think, from this presentation was really to share, you know, what you've experienced in Scotland. And although Curriculum for Excellence and Curriculum for Wales are not completely identical, they're very similar, and maybe we're at a different starting point to where you were all those years ago. I think, you know, all the skills, you know, we've already embedded all of that. So I think the thought, you know, is that it's still a massive upheaval for us, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, going into a new curriculum. But once the panic is over, once we start taking time to look, once we have time to look at it and take it slowly, that curriculum or any new curriculum with such purpose can give us new doors to teaching and learning languages and new ways of teaching and learning. So I think, you know, the positive outlook that you've all had in Scotland towards that, I think really paid off, and we need to possibly keep that positive outlook and embrace the that opportunity to to make it our own.
Yeah, the collegiality was huge for us. It was a really big thing, and it meant getting people in sitting with big bits of paper, you know, and the pens and your post-it notes. Don't tell the eco warriors, right? There was a lot of paper, okay, big bits of pens, you know, and kind of going around and looking at what worked and what have you, and there was time invested in that, because you can't do this, you know. So we had to create that space for people to come together and to be able to sit and work on it. And we still, and it's funny because we all kind of remember the venues we were in about it. Also, do you remember it was that day? It was in such a place, or that day in such a place, and we still do that now. And really, because you just can't do this on your own. So it's good to actually bring. It's a long process,
isn't
it? Of course,
you know, over the years, and
it's
carries on.
And it's one of the things, as we'd said, Steph, and I put this offer out to everybody, that I've spoken to a number of my colleagues, you know, who've all kind of gone through this and whatever else, and we're very happy, you know, to share what we've done, you know, and actually, like, not simple. Now I know they'll be different, okay, but to actually share what those look like, and I'll get some examples for you to share. But also, if anybody would like, you know, like to be paired up with a department, you know, it's a bit like doing a wee exchange, you know, a wee exchange with Glasgow. But that idea where we could match, you know, schools up or people up, you know, and almost like having, you know, somebody you can bounce. I'm very happy to do it, but I've also got, as I described, some of my vintage colleagues where they're like, yeah, absolutely, no bother. Do you know, that we were more than happy to actually say, look, this is what it really looks like, and here's what we, you know. So that offers there, because I think, you know, that idea to kind of learn from each other's experience, you know, and we would learn as well, do you know, so it would be great.
Thank you. Well, I think we can open the floor to questions if some people have, but I think Laurie might be in the background here. Laurie, are you there?
I am.
Hi, Laurie. So, Laurie, do you want to explain, you know, for those who want to use the Welsh?
Yeah, no problem. So we'll switch on the translation now, and any questions in Welsh will be translated by me. So you'll need to look for the globe, normally at the bottom of your screen where it says chat and so on. But if it's not there, it'll be under the 3 dots. So we'll switch it on now. Diolch, Eirian.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So if anybody's got any questions, if you'd like to either put your hand up or just come in, that would be great. Whilst people are thinking, I got one question. Could you remind us what does SLEC stands for?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's Society, Learning, Employability and Culture. So those are the 4 areas that we work within, you know. So for example, society would be all about, you know, your friends and family, you know, that kind of idea, you know, the kind of local area. And then learning's all about school and college and future plans. Employability is about, you know, CVs and about skills and your own abilities and things. And then culture is all about everything that's kind of, you know, I suppose with, I mean, they're huge, big things, they really are. And if you look on the SQA, it gives you the kind of topic strands, and it kind of, and you look at and I'll send you the link for it actually, and it gives you, you know, these 4 blocks, and they get more expanded the further you go up within that qualification framework. Do you know, it was actually really good for us because it's giving you these kind of 4 key areas, and everything else kind of fits into that, you know, which is nice.
Lovely. Is there anybody here who would like to ask a question? There's no silly question, by the way. Don't be shy.
Looks like, is that a wee question in the chat, I think? Yeah.
Do you use any particular poems, films, books with Key Stage 3? This is something we'd love to add in.
Okay, now tell me, Key Stage 3, what age is that?
So it's 11 till 14.
Okay, yep. And so what we do is there's usually within that culture unit, there'll be film studies. So, and of course, and you have to find appropriate films, as we know. We can't be showing films that might have inappropriate material, shall we say, my friends. So it gives you an excuse to pretend you're at the Cannes Film Festival. But we do a thing which is for one of our qualifications at National 4, it's called the added value unit, and very often it's like a film study and also a piece of reading as well. So we do that. Yeah, that's quite common. We do use poetry. I wouldn't say there's no requirement to do poetry, and we have literature as a core component, but not until towards like advanced higher. So we don't have them as core components, because what we tend to find is that anything that's age appropriate for children isn't language appropriate. So for example, if our children are age 12, they can't read Harry Potter in French because they don't have those skills to do it, because they just don't have the language capability. So sometimes it's kind of hard to find things that are age appropriate. Do you know what I mean? It's like very often, they're maybe saying, oh, we'll do the Hungry Caterpillar, and when children are like 9 or 10, children have been doing the Hungry Caterpillar since they were in the womb. So it's about trying to find things that are age appropriate, but also linguistically appropriate. But yeah, we do it. I mean, and I think as well, there's an expectation, I think, of doing much more kind of multimedia now as well, because that's what they're used to. But no, there's certainly still the use of poetry, and more so because there's and as you know yourselves, within the kind of school year, there's lots of kind of focused weeks, and there's World Book Day, and there's focuses on literacy, and like we have a thing like Scots Language Week, for example. So there's a whole load of things will come out in Scots. So we'll do the same kind of. We've got Languages Week Scotland coming up in February. So there's a real push on literature, poetry, all of that going out in different languages as well. So yeah, again, it's not a core component, but most teachers will bring that in, because that's part of the reason you love the language, isn't it? Do you know?
I think in our curriculum for Wales, that's one of the statements of what matter, literature, and
yep.
So yeah, it would fit in really, really well. Mm-hmm. Any other question? Or any comments? Or they're all very quiet.
They're all knackered. They're all needing a wee mulled wine, a mince pie,
I think so,
a dark room.
No.
As I say, more than happy to take anything, please. Oh, Le Petit Nicolas, what's that?
Petit Nicolas has been translated to Welsh, so you
Welsh.
can do reverse translation.
Oh,
very
fab.
Solid. Yeah.
So we have, like, for example, in our Gaelic medium schools, where everything's taught through the medium of Gaelic, then you would find that they do much more in terms of kind of literature and poetry. It's for fluent speakers, and they've come right through that, and that's such. Again, it's a bit like, in English language classes, they'll be doing poetry and literature and things, so they would do that in Gaelic and Gaelic medium.
Well, Gillian, do you find that learners are more confident speakers?
Yeah, they are now, because we've put that focus on talking and listening. But that involved teachers being a wee bit brave as well, because it's easier to control, isn't it, when they're quieter. But yeah, and I think because we've gone now for this earlier start, one of the things that I've loved to hear, well, I know it's not ideal, but it's been lovely to hear from secondary practitioners to say that they've had to review their courses for about 3 years in a row, because children are now coming up from primary school with a much more competent level of language because of that earlier start, and because we've completely redone our primary planners and things. So and they want to talk. That's your confident individual, but they want to talk, because there's been a big focus on that. Because for children who may not, for example, progress on to academic qualifications, they've still had a really rich language learning experience, so there's still an awful lot of talking and listening going on. So yeah, we are finding that they're much, but I think as well, we see that children are beginning to be much more exposed to languages, for example, in the media and in social media, so it's not as alien for them. I mean, I grew up in a tiny wee town in the west coast of Scotland where everybody was white and spoke English. My daughter has grown up in Glasgow where, most of her classmates speak different language, and that's normal for her, and I think it's beautiful,
I also heard that Scotland, the latest PISA sort of review, children in Scotland were the second most tolerant community in the world, and maybe that has had an impact as well. For excellence and what
you would hope. Listen, you always get, people are always ready to poke fun at stuff, aren't they, and pick out the good and the bad, and it's usually people that actually don't work within it, and they don't really, you want to know how it's going on, ask the punters on the floor, ask the teachers, we'll tell you what's happening, my love. But I think definitely, in terms of that kind of tolerance and multiculturalism and respect for each other's language and things like that, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you know, so I'm going to share your presentation anyway with everybody.
Yeah, of course.
You'll have Gillian's email address if you need
Yeah.
any further. You might have questions later on, but we also got two more sessions. Two more sessions for the secondary and primary.
Yeah.
So there's one for the primary, similar to this one in January. Then we'll have one on planning differently for the secondary, and then a session on transition primary secondary, which might also cover the sort of thing that you've just been saying here about developing learners at a younger age and the impact it's got later on in the year. So if there's no more questions, I would like to really thank you very, very much, Gillian, for making time for us, for working with us. And we're looking forward to seeing you in January. Oh, there's a nice little comment here. I don't have a question, but this session has been a breath of fresh air. Despite my end of term fatigue, I feel energized about developing the new curriculum. Thank you. Well, that's really, really nice to read, because this is exactly how I feel every time I speak to Gillian. So that's brilliant. Thank you ever so much.
And listen, anybody, please do email me. Absolutely more than delighted to take it. Your brain is frazzled, feel your pain. I've just realised I'm sitting here with like a Christmas tree sticking at my head. So, you know, more than happy to take anything at all. And, you know, if I can be of any help, I'll look forward to working with you. And I hope you have a lovely holiday when it comes. It sounds like it's definitely well earned, doesn't it?
Yeah. Have a lovely, lovely end of term and a great Christmas. And we'll see you all in the new year. Bye-bye, everyone. Au revoir.
Time voor. Cheering, Drast.
Thanks a lot, Laurie. Diolch yn fawr.